Hello, dear students. We're going to do the quick review and explanations of topic 1, 3 quiz on program design and development. Three questions. Question number 1, and I'm going to try to go fast but explain some of these things that you may be seeing for the first time. So, question number 1, in the following procedure, the parameter max is a positive integer. I'll come back to the actual procedure. We're going to glance at what is the actual question so we can focus on analysis. Which of the following is the most appropriate documentation to appear with print nums procedure? So the documentation needs to explain the inputs, outputs, and the purpose of the procedure. So let's see. Procedure is kind of there's different names, function, method, whatever. But basically, it's a box to put one process in that you can then repeatedly call. And a proper way to interface with it is by using parameters that provide a procedure's input values, so things they might need to do their job, and then they return sometimes values or display things. This one does not seem to be returning anything to whoever calls it, but it just displays something. So the procedure print nums, and then there's a parameter max. So this can be any number that you send to it. It's not just one particular value. It's a variable that can hold any number that when you call this procedure from some other program, so you can procedures are there so they can be called numerous times. Uh, when you call it, you would give it a number to take place of this parameter max. So whatever max is going to be used down here in that context. So we have another variable we assign, that's an assignment operator. So we say basically put 1 into count. So it assigns value 1 to count. Okay. And then it says repeat until, which is pretty intuitive. And these brackets basically tell us what belongs to what. So you notice that procedure basically opens up a bracket here. And then we use tabbing here. It's not necessary, but to help us kind of visualize. So this bottom bracket is basically holds everything in it. The inner brackets here just hold what belongs to the loop. So there's nesting here. So it's like with algebra, the whichever bracket you open last is the one being closed first. So we're opening up one, opening up the second one, and then when we're closing brackets, we go in reverse. This bracket here is closing the first one immediately before it. I should say. I'm sorry. Hopefully that made sense. And again, it's somewhat intuitive. So basically, these two lines of code here belong to this loop, and they're going to be repeated until the variable count is greater than max. So count starts at 1, and then this is going to repeat when count until, so it's going to stop repeating when count is bigger than max. And all it's doing is it's going to display the value of count, and then it's going to add 2 to count and assign it back to itself. So again, this is if you saw the previous videos I talk about this is very common. It's a way to increment or decrease the values, and you do that by adding or subtracting something from the variable and then assigning it back to itself. The order of operations is always do stuff on the right hand side of the assignment. So it's going to compute whatever this is. Yes, count appears on both sides, but basically it's going to take the current value of count, add 2 to it, and then assign it back to itself. So you can kind of visualize how this is going to go. Count is going to start at 1, and then it's going to display that value and add 2 to it. And then it's going to keep displaying that count until it goes over max. So let's say max is 7. It's going to start count at 1. It's not greater than 7 yet, so it's going to display 1, add 2 to it, which makes it now 3. It's going to check 3 is not greater than 7 yet, so it's going to display 3, add 2 to it, which is 5. It's going to check 5 is still not greater than 7, so it's going to display 5. It's going to add 2 to it, which is 7. 7 is not greater than 7, so it's going to display 7. Add 2 to it, it'll be 9, and at this point it won't keep going anymore. So if max was 7, this procedure here would display 1, 3, 5, and 7. So in other words, it's displaying all of the odd numbers that are up to and including max, because it says greater than max, not greater than or equal to. So, which of the following is the most appropriate? Prints all positive. Nope, it don't print positive numbers. It prints negative. I'm sorry, not all. It only prints odd numbers. So when it says prints all positive even numbers, nope, it's printing odd numbers. So prints all positive odd integers that are less than or equal to max. That's the correct one. That's what we just said. You got to watch out for this one that says prints odd numbers that are greater than max. That's not true. Even though over here it says count is greater than max, just because that sign says greater, that doesn't mean that it prints number greater than max. It says repeat until the value you're printing is greater than max, which means it won't print any numbers greater than max, but it can print max itself. So that's why it prints, it's option B here, right? That's what we said. Prints all positive odd integers that are less than or equal to max. Question number 2, we have in the following procedure, parameters x and y are integers. So we have another procedure. It's this big box, and it says calculate something. That's the name of the procedure, and it's going to receive two numbers. So this is, some sort of a, function that's going to receive two numbers. So in some other program, in some other, part of a process or program, you would call this procedure when you need to do this operation on two numbers. Okay, so, and it's going to display it. It doesn't return it or anything. So it says result equals to, or it receives the value of x plus y. So it's going to add x plus y first here, and it's going to assign the result of that operation to result. And then it's going to divide it by x and assign it back to itself and print that. So basically, it adds x plus y and then divides it by x. So let's see which one of these is most appropriate. So again, it adds them and divides by x. So this ain't it. I mean, this is just algebra, so I'm not going to take too long. This is the one, right? So it displays the value of x plus 5 first, so a grouping by parentheses, and then divided by x. The value of x must not be 0 is because we are dividing by x here. That would compile, but it would give you a runtime error if you call this function with a value of x being equal to 0. So this is something you would either put into documentation, or in real world situation, you would add a little conditional statement before you try this operation to make sure that x is not equal to 0, because you cannot divide by 0. That would crash the whole program. And again, another little tricky one. Let's see. I forget which one was this. So let me see. In the following procedure, the parameter num list is a list of numbers, and the parameters j and k are integers. So we have procedure called swap list elements, and we have num list and then j and k. So we have three parameters. That's three things that this list will receive to do what it needs to do. And just by the name of it, the operation is to swap list elements. So lists come, it's just a list of items, and each item is indexed. So there's an index representing the location of an item in the list, and they're integer values. Sometimes they start at 0, sometimes they start at 1. Regardless, here what we have is a list that we have two values j and k with. So it says create a new list and assign to it all of the values from num list. So basically we're copying it. We're copying the num list into a new list. So now we have two of them. And then it says in the new list at location j, assign the value from location k in the original num list. So I can see this can be tricky. Now we have two lists, and they are, start off with completely identical. We just copied the input list. So we receive a list, we make a new list that's a copy of the original we received, and then in the new list we put whatever was in the original lists at location k, we put it in the new list at location j, and whatever is in the original at location j, we put it in the new list at location k. That effectively swaps those two places, and then we return the new list. So in effect, sorry, my phone is going off here. In effect, the new list is the same as the original num list, except that we swapped the elements, the values that were in locations j and k. Which of the following is the most appropriate documentation? Okay, so index values can't be negative. And I'm not sure if here they can be 0 or 1, but let's see. So returns a copy of num list with elements at indices j and k interchanged. The value of j must be between 0 and the value of k inclusive. That j and k don't have to be; they can be anywhere. They could be even the same location. So doesn't that's not true. The first line is true, second line is not true. Okay, returns a copy of num list with elements at indices j and k interchanged. So that's correct. Um, and the values of j and k must both be between 1 and length of num list. Now that's correct. So in this particular fake language, it's not a real language. It's just like a pseudo-coded language of some sort. But they start in this indexing at 1, which means that the last index value is going to be just however many elements there is. The function length here of num list returns how many elements are there. So your j and k values can't be outside of the length of the list. It can't be 0 or negative in this particular case. In some languages, it could be 0, but index values can't be negative because, index values are just basically counting off which item in the list that something is. So, when you start counting elements of the list, you start either from 0 or 1, but they only go upward. And then they stop at some point because there's a finite length of the list. So if your first element is indexed 1, then the last element is indexed at however many there is. So if you have 10 elements in the list, the first one will be indexed 1 and the 10th one will be indexed 10. So those j and k values in our function, both of those have to be less than the uh, or less than or including the number of elements of the num list, and they can't be less than 1. These two are wrong because it does not interchange the values of the parameters j and k. That would mean that you're basically trading values of j and k, and that's not true. So in this context, num list could be the first 10 numbers, let's say 1 through 10. So let's say num list is just 1 through 10, and j is 5, k is 7. Okay, so the loop will replace the values at the fifth and seventh location, but these two numbers remain the same. So the j and k will still be 5 and 7, while the elements in fifth and seventh location will be transposed. Their index values do not change. So this concept of interchanging the values of parameters is not true. What we're doing is we're interchanging elements at those index values. All right, thank you. I know this is pretty tricky, so we'll talk more about it. Thank you.